In the realm of football legends, one story stands out, the tale of a player who shunned the spotlight, yet dazzled the world with unparalleled talent. Welcome to our channel, where today, we uncover the enigmatic journey of Jorge El Mágico González, the mysterious player who refused to become the greatest of all time. 1986. Maradona just led Argentina to World Cup glory. But amidst the celebrations, a quieter story unfolded. Maradona dropped a bombshell. A player even better than Pelé existed. The reporters asked who that man was. However, Maradona didn't bother putting it into words. He knew those never did him justice. So instead, he said, "Go and find out, you ignorant man. They call it the Hall of Fame, a huge building shaped like a football. Among those familiar faces and names, you'll find an odd one, Jorge El Mágico González." Manolín Bueno said he was so good, he made it seem like Maradona was playing with a limp. Even more impressive, at one point, he was the only living football player to have a stadium named after him. He's become known as the player who could have been the best but did not want to, the one who wanted to be forgotten. Yet, his face seems to be permanently burnt into the memory of those who saw him play. But where did it all go wrong? Well, it was Maradona's fault actually, kind of. In 1984, the two were both playing for Barcelona side by side, but if they were trouble on the pitch, they were even worse off of it. And at one point, the team was staying at this hotel in California, and Maradona decided to hit the fire alarm in the middle of the night as a prank, and somehow it was Mágico who ended up getting punished for that whole situation. But let's rewind a bit. If you're born in El Salvador, your chances of making it to European football are next to none. Mágico was just different. At 16, he was already making his debut, and before he had even turned 18, he was already moving to Deportivo FAS for 60,000 colones, which was absurd at the time, especially for a teenager, but thankfully for them, it worked out incredibly well. In his second year at the club, he led them to the CONCACAF Champions Cup title, named the best team in all of Central and North America. And the year after that, in 1980, he joined El Salvador for the CONCACAF Championship qualification and somehow managed to get them through the whole campaign with only one defeat, finishing in second place, topping the goal scorers table, even outscoring Hugo Sanchez with 5 goals in 7 matches. But wait, that still wasn't all of it. The year after that, once they were actually in the championship itself, they faced Mexico, and Mágico pulled off one of the most absurd runs you'll ever see, beating them for the first time in 26 years. Once the tournament was over, El Salvador was ahead of Mexico by just 1 point, in second place. For only the second time in history, El Salvador would be at the World Cup, all thanks to that moment of genius. Right then and there, according to everyone in the country, Mágico was like a saint. And then, with each friendly that led up to the World Cup, things only got crazier. At one point, they faced PSG, as weird as it may sound, and they beat them 3-1, with Mágico playing so well that a journalist described it by saying, "Might be the best performance I've ever seen. Every time he dashed towards goal, it was like he was going by car, while the others followed him on foot." PSG offered riches, he declined. Inter Milan whispered, he ignored. Only 2 months before the World Cup, El Mágico assisted the first and scored 2 free kicks, one of them in the 89th minute to go in front 3-2, and as they went into the tournament, the whole country seemed convinced that somehow Mágico alone would be enough to make them stand out. But instead, what awaited them was the most bitter and terrible night in memory. Right on their first match, El Salvador was defeated 10-1, the biggest defeat in the history of the World Cup. They tried to justify themselves, claiming they had been unable to train the day before since their equipment had been stolen, which was confirmed by FIFA. But regardless, it was a huge shame. The only positive thing was that Mágico was still great, and in the aftermath of it all, he was flooded with transfer offers like never before. Teams all across Europe tried, but they all failed. He had an excuse not to sign for any of them. Italy was too humid when it came to England. He said he couldn't ever live on an island. And Germany, well, he refused to even talk about them. By the end, he had signed for Cádiz in the Spanish second tier. Why? It's one of the hottest places in Europe and they love flamenco. That's it. And even there, he only showed up for his supposed presentation 20 days late after the club had to get the police to go look for him. Turns out, he was all the way out in Madrid with a friend, just going from one bar to the other, and this behavior wouldn't stop here. Late to training? Always. Sleeping in locker rooms? Regularly. Yet, his magic on the pitch was undeniable. His teammates and manager kinda loved him. After all, they could never complain about his performances, and he was extremely charismatic, so they took him in like a sort of mascot, always trying to find funny ways to get him to wake up early. Once the manager bought him this obnoxious Donald the Duck clock that would quack at him until he woke up. But regardless, he would always have these funny one-liners. If the coach asked him to make more runs, he would say that running is for cowards. His autograph, he would spend like 2 minutes on it, always trying to make every single one special. He also loved talking to the homeless. He would help them out with whatever they needed. Once one of his teammates gave him one of his expensive jackets, because Mágico would always arrive to club dinners and meetings wearing a t-shirts and shorts. But only a few days later, his teammate found some homeless guy sleeping on the street with his jacket on. Obviously, there was much more to his life than football, as he said it himself. "I don't treat football like a career, I just play for fun." What he did on the pitch was still by far the primary excuse for his actions. Though no one denied that he was often very lazy on the pitch, it was guaranteed that every game there would be a magic moment that would completely change the course of that match. It was undeniable that he was the most important player on the team. Not only did he get them promoted to La Liga for only the third time in their history, right on his debut season, but once there, he pulled off 14 league goals, which was almost twice as many as any other player in the history of the club, and even allowed him to reach the podium of the league's goal-scoring table, making it all even more special by the fact that, well, he was a big game player. He literally scored twice in his first ever match against Real Madrid with 2 incredible runs that almost made it seem like the other players were stuck to the ground. And as incredible as it may seem, his performances against Barcelona were even better, with Mágico again scoring 2 goals, but supposedly not only nutmegging even Maradona. Barcelona came calling, a chance to play alongside the legend. By the end of the season, even if Cádiz had been relegated regardless, I mean, to be fair, that 16th place was their best finish ever. But yeah, no matter what happened, after what he had done to Barcelona, they couldn't resist giving him a chance, but they also weren't willing to take a gamble on such an unpredictable character. So they used their tour as a trial. As long as he played well and didn't get in trouble, soon, he'd be lining up alongside Maradona week in, week out. But as much as the fans claim that watching them play together was like having 2 Maradonas on the pitch at the same time. On that famous night in the hotel, Maradona supposedly pulled the fire alarm as a prank. But while every single player and guest in the building ran down immediately thinking that there actually was a fire, Mágico claims that he somehow knew it was Maradona, so he just never came down. Meanwhile, Menotti, the coach, began a head count and quickly noticed he was missing, which led him to force his way past security, going up 2 floors, knocking on Mágico's door, only to eventually find him passed out in bed with 2 girls lying next to him. After this, there was no doubt in his mind that Mágico was going back to Cádiz. Had Maradona not touched that alarm, maybe he and Mágico would have had at least 1 season together. The new coach, Benito Joanet, could not stand him and thought the fans put up one banner after the other, with the funniest of all famously reading, "That who doesn't like Mágico doesn't even like his own mother." It didn't matter by January, he was already leaving to Valladolid, who finally got their man, 4 years after they had first scouted him. But unfortunately, Mágico did not get along at his new club. He seemed to constantly miss the city and the people of Cádiz, and after only 9 matches, he was threatened by the first coach, who told him that he had 15 days to get his game in order, or he'd be sent away. So before that even happened, he disappeared. Having now hit absolute rock bottom, he began training with Atlético Marte in El Salvador, trying to get in shape, and in what seemed like a miracle, the manager Carlos Jurado just happened to be friends with Manolo Carlo, precisely the new manager of Cádiz. And after a lot negotiation, Mágico came back to the city of his heart. Under one condition, they forced him to visit a psychologist every week, or to have a club employee get him from his house every morning. But they added kinds of clauses, fines and fees to his contract, trying to get him to settle down. But yet, it never happened. Over the next few years, they just ended up pretty much not paying him, because every month the total amount in fines would be higher than his wages, and although that wasn't the solution they had planned, it kinda worked. He kept scoring magical goals at a rate none of his teammates could match, and since they weren't even paying him, why send him away? By 1987, he led them to what is to this day their best ever league campaign. Some clubs like Atalanta even gave another go at trying to sign him, but obviously it never went through. By 1989, everyone probably thought he'd retire there, but instead, it all took a dark turn, when out of nowhere, Jorge was sentenced to 6 months in jail for doing that awful thing to a young woman in the house of one of his teammates. It was pretty gruesome, and though the club would strangely decide to keep him around soon after, he himself decided to flee to El Salvador, where he would play until he was 41, before retiring and becoming a taxi driver. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales from the world of football. Until next time, thanks for watching.